Welcome back from lunch, everyone. I wasn't going to do this at first, but I was challenged, so I will do it. I was going to be afraid that I would butcher all the French names, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Today, we have a great panel. I will start with Stéphane Morency. He's the Vice President and Chief Investments Officer at Fondation. Welcome. We also have Hélène Cagnon, Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Vice President Stakeholder Engagement at CAA. Welcome as well. And then Patrick de Koster. I'm probably the only one here that can pronounce that actually how it is supposed to be. President and CEO of Boralex. And today we're going to discuss leading with purpose, value creation in business model. And you all bring a very unique perspective. So I want to set the stage. Maybe Stéphane, starting with you, can you explain what your role is and what role sustainability plays within what you do at Fondation?
Okay, so I'm Chief Investment Officer. Anything that has to do with how we allocate the capital is under me. But I think we need to understand what Fondation is for that thing about purpose you're talking about. It's a labor-sponsored fund. And a labor-sponsored fund, what it is actually we have hundreds of thousands of workers that are giving us the money, so we invest it. And it's workers unionized, non-unionized. But the way we were created, it was unionized workers 25 years ago. And when they were giving us their money, they were saying, yeah, I want retirement, so I'll return. But we want you guys to make the world better. 25 years ago, it was a broad concept. So we went through responsible investment, socially responsible investment. And 8 years ago, we kind of pivoted towards something that is more like impact investment philosophy. And the way to understand it is three things, I think. We recognize that there was a lot of change to come, radical transformation in our economy, coming from limits of the planet and needs of the people. And that these changes or transformation would actually create new risks and new opportunities. So we've positioned ourselves as investors in companies that are enablers of these transformation. We finance change through these companies. And you got to understand, for the sake of this conversation, we're talking private equity, small, medium-sized focus enterprise. And I would say the last thing is, I think that we're a small fund, 3.5 billion under management, which is pretty small in the landscape. We have the innovation and agility to make the demonstration that you can finance change. So I think we aspire to inspire by demonstration that finance can do it, so that our 3.5 billion, like Mark Carney was saying, can become 3.5 trillion with other players in the market.
Thank you. And Hélène, how about you? You bring a different perspective.
Yes,
leading
so I'm Chief Sustainability Officer as VP Stakeholder Engagement at CAE, and I think it's important for people to understand what CAE is, because people still see us as the world leader in flight simulators, which we are, but because we're so dominant in that market, we had to move into training, into services. So what we do is that we train pilots everywhere you fly in the world. The pilots were likely trained by CAE or on one of our equipment around the world, so you're safe. So we're there to make the world safer. And we also train defense allied forces and healthcare professionals, again, for those moments that matter, make sure that they are ready. And also we diversified now with some recent acquisitions into operational support for airlines. So not just the training of pilots, but also the operational support, crew management, catering, flight plan, flight optimization, that sort of thing. So now we're more into high tech. We're, of course, leveraging virtual reality. That's what simulation-based training is all about. So we've been in existence for 75 years, but we've been in virtual reality since almost the beginning. So when people were not really talking about virtual reality and digital and AI, we were already, leveraging those technologies. So we're a high-tech company in 3 verticals. We're therefore in an industry that is highly visible in terms of carbon. And so we'll come back to that. And so my role as Chief Sustainability Officer is to be part of the executive committee and to be that agent of change inside the company in the C-suite, making sure that we're true to our sustainability journey. And of course, it's a journey. We're far from there. And we're continuing to improve every year.
Thank you. And Patrick, how about you at Boralex?
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm the CEO of Boralex. I'm with the company since 22 years, which is a big part of the history. The company is 32 years old. I grew up in Europe. I work a lot in Europe, and I'm in Quebec since 4 years. So Boralex is a maybe you have seen Hugo d'Amour yesterday. We are of the same root with the Lemaire family, with the idea of creating a renewable company in the beginning of the 90s, which was quite crazy idea at that time, or a visionary idea like Bernard had. And so today we operate, the market cap is almost 4 billion. We operate 3 gigawatt. We have 6 gigawatt of development pipeline and in Canada, in the US, in France, and in the UK. ESG and sustainability is obviously in our DNA, and that's what we said since years. And Cascade and Boralex has been created with the idea of shared value. It was not like it is known today, but Bernard was always speaking about partage and sharing. And when I took over the position, I discovered that, yes, it's in our DNA, but it's like when you have good genetic and you don't train, or you don't train as much as you can, you're not performing like you can. And so we decide to invest more resource in this direction, have a clear plan, and we're going this journey like you. And I think we are creating value for shareholders, the company, and certainly the communities. We will discuss about that.
And obviously leading for purpose, that talks about business strategy as well, ultimately. How do you, as a renewable company, it's pretty obvious that that's your the core of what you do, produce clean energy. But how have you, outside of that core business, have incorporated sustainability in your proposition, and what does that mean for Boralex?
But what are we doing? What we are doing is we're investing for the long term, the very long term. Okay, project 10 years or 15 years ago were for, say, 20 years lifetime. Now we're looking to 30, 35 years lifetime. So it's very long when you compare to climate change and all the things and quarters. Every quarters we have to meet with investors. So you need to have this vision of the long term. And when you develop a project, you have community, you have government, you have sometimes First Nations in North America. Obviously, you have a client, which is the utility, or today we have corporation. And then what we say is we come as a guest and we operate as neighbors, and because we will stay there. And we know that if you do something wrong by developing your project, then you will have problem on the long term. And the best way to do that is to take care of specifically the sharing of the value that you are creating and explaining that, because it's not when you arrive with something new, wind turbines, small hydro, or in the past, and no solar panel or storage. You bring something new and then you change. You're in the middle of the countryside and you change something. And when you change something, you have to explain, and you have to take this time to have the people loving at the end your project. And that's what we have when we renew project. It's very easy to do it because we have to take this time.
And Hélène, the word stakeholder came up, right? I'm sure within your role as stakeholder engagement, that's almost your daily job. How do you align the objectives of CEA with the stakeholders, and how do you sometimes work with those counter forces? Are there sometimes moments that you need to do something else that stakeholders are not quite expecting from you.
Yeah, and I think I want to piggyback also on what you said about inspiring, and I want to share the story on how we decided to turbocharge really our carbon journey, because I think it's interesting for you to see where the pressure is coming from. You'll all remember in 2019 all the demonstrations worldwide, big demonstrations in the streets with Greta. There was one right here in Montreal in September, and the kids of my CEO and my own son were in that demonstration. And that very evening, they looked at their dad and they said, "You're a CEO of a multinational, you're in civil aviation defense. What are you going to do more and different to protect our planet?" And so my CEO said, "Okay, what are we going to do?
Urgent. Yeah.
Help me here." And he said, "I want to be bold. I want to inspire my kids, our employees, and other companies in our sector to say that we have to act now." And so we came back and we said, we think we should make the commitment to become carbon neutral within a year. And he said, "Okay, we're going to do that." And then the pandemic hit in March 2020, and we lost 90% of our revenues in a matter of days. So it was hard. And I think all our stakeholders would probably have recognized that it was okay to push that to the right. And we said, no, we did this for the right reason. We wanted to say we need to act for climate change now. So we remained true to our commitment, and we started to compensate our residual emissions, scope 1, scope 2, and at least the air travel of our employees in scope 3, because we're in that business. And what that has done, and I know, it could be controversial. People say, all these instruments, are they valid, not valid? But what I want to share is that we've created for ourselves a built-in incentive to further reduce at the source quickly. Because it would be much easier for us to say we're going to reduce, and of course we're going to continue to reduce in 10 years, in 20 years, and of course aviation has the target of net zero by 2050, and we're part of that industry. And push that and continue at a certain pace. But now we have an invoice for carbon offsets. We need to renegotiate every year. We have those renewable energy certificates for 200 sites in 40 countries. And so each site is accountable. There's a big spotlight. In Japan, your RECT is the most expensive of our network. What are you doing about energy efficiency? So we are going a bit in the reverse mode. Other companies have decided to say we're going to continue with our journey and compensate eventually. And we said, no, it's going to hurt now. And because it hurts now, we're serious about this. And I'm telling you, that's why we announced that we're electrifying part of our fleet of aircraft. That's why we're doing all these energy efficiency projects. That's why we're now looking at some power purchase agreement longer term in the US to have more visibility on our renewable energy and all of that. There's no way we would be doing these things at this pace if we did not have that built-in incentive. So from a stakeholder perspective, the employees have reacted extremely positively, and they're super proud, and it's actually helping us a lot in terms of employee retention and attraction, because they feel that we're serious about this. And from other stakeholders, some people sometimes they don't understand, about the compensation, but when we explain it, they see it. And they realize that, we're doing this because we're serious. This is not just we're compensated and we're not serious. No. The compensation actually is having a huge impact on how we are embarking on our journey.
Yeah. And it is truly a very inspiring story. I think the audience also felt that. And I hope the kids are happy with this intermediate solution. Stefan, I saw you nodding, and I think you want to jump in here, right? Because
and the thing, what I think is really inspiring about that is that we need more CI. Now that I hear you talking, because these bold decision actually has a trickle-down effect in the whole of the market. I said it. We're invested in a small medium enterprise who wants to be enablers. That means they have solutions to help reach your targets and reach your objectives. But the thing is, small medium enterprise, when it comes to demonstrating with science, with data, that this is how they score on sustainability, it's pretty hard for them. It's actually very, very hard for them. Most of them don't even have good financial information. So when you come up to them and you tell them, hey, we'll need some extra work from you guys to get that sustainability data. It's not a built-in incentive like you were talking. It's not a built-in incentive, and for us, it always starts the same way. They get invited to a RFP driven by these guys, and then they turn around and they tell us like, hey, you've asked the same question when you got into our company, and you're asking the same question year over year. Could you help us positioning ourselves for that RFP? And we're talking large players. So that's large RFPs that can change the value of the company, the life of the employees. So it becomes really important for them. So we actually help them out that first time. But what happens next is that they internalize that as being strategic. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the board's asking questions. How do we score on this? Because it's becoming strategic. They bring that to a board level, a shareholder level, an executive level, and they start acting on their business model to make sure that this is a competitive advantage. So we need more of that. Sometimes like it's the regulate me thing, but I think that companies with purpose work with companies with purpose that are going to be champions of tomorrow. My SMEs today that are recognizing that it is strategic because it positions them as privileged suppliers to a CAE, they're going to win. They're the ones that are going to win, and they're the ones that are actually like aligning their purpose with their purpose.
Yeah, and this exactly brings us to the next topic, right? Because we've talked a lot, and Mark Kearney also highlighted this in the panel before lunch, is ultimately your scope 3 is somebody else's scope 1 and 2. And that's ultimately, if we want to, as a society, decarbonize, it's not just one company doing it, but it is the entire value chain.
Yep.
And whether that gets pushed by the supplier or the buyer is requesting it through an RFP, that's ultimately everybody is interdependent. So just to understand a little bit on this dynamic as well, Helen, maybe you can talk a little bit on how what it means for CAE. Where is that push or pull coming from, and how are you developing a strategy on your scope 3 emissions?
So we are being asked by our customers more and more. So the airlines, because they made that net zero commitment, and for an airline, it's all about their scope 1. It's aviation fuel, but we're part of their scope 3. But they're asking us before they buy anything from us, services or products, the pressure is coming from them. And the pressure, it's very interesting that the pressure is also coming from countries in defense. And 1 minute in a fighter jet in terms of carbon equals one full day in a full flight simulators in terms of carbon footprint. So the countries are starting to think your simulation-based training and readiness is highly sophisticated. We can actually prepare and do difficult maneuvers much better than in real aircraft. If we move a higher percentage of our readiness on simulation-based training, we can actually reduce the carbon. So we're seeing those asks and with the criteria, in terms of how we can help them in a lot of RFPs. So the pressure is coming not just in civil aviation, but also defense. And so we are creating, now we're bringing, I wouldn't say we're creating pressure with our suppliers, because we want to align with suppliers that have shared values, and we take them under our wings. I'm in aerospace, does it show? So we take them under our wings. And so recently we had a forum of our top suppliers. We brought them into the room. Some of them are more mature than us in ESG. Some of them don't even know how to spell ESG. Okay, so it goes like this. And so we said, we're just going to, equal everybody here. We're going to do a training. We brought in some experts and we did a climate change and carbon footprint training for everybody. So everyone could ask their questions. Nobody was shy. Then we had our engineers sit down with each of these companies and say, we're going to look at your operations and help you. Then we're going to help you because there are some programs where you can get some funding with the aerospace cluster here in Quebec and in Ontario. So you could get funding to actually do your carbon footprint and then carbon reduction plan. And then we can work together. So it's not as if we're sending a questionnaire and we're saying, just give us your data and you need to reduce because we need to reduce. We know this is complicated. We know that you don't have all the answers. And we know that we're not the only one asking you. So for the smaller ones, we take them under our wings. For the bigger ones, the industry is actually getting together to the International Aerospace Environment Group, where we're going to harmonize how we're asking all of our suppliers to respond. So it's going to be through EcoVadis so that everyone basically has the same ask. But the small companies, they won't go through that process, and we need to help them mature. And that's how we're going to decarbonize. If we just put the pressure, they're too small. It's not going to happen. So we need to help them, educate them. So we start at the basic, and then we help them, and we say, we're in this together. We're going to get through this. And so that's how we started.
And Patrick, how does that work for Boralex? Do you see the same trends? Do you help your suppliers? Obviously, with a total clean asset portfolio, you don't have a lot of...
Yeah, we are asked by some customers because it's interesting that for 25 years, the customer of the company was obliged buyer of electricity, like Hydro-Québec has to make a RFP because the government has decided. Same in Ontario, same in France. And some years ago, it started with the sustainable chief officer of a company coming to us and say, I want to buy green electricity. It started in France. And he has to take his energy purchaser because the guy doesn't want to come and because it's too expensive. And it's completely changed with the crisis now. So that's one thing. Other thing, we signed 4 years ago with Orange in France, and they say you should be at the minimum of silver medal EcoVadis yourself. We're no gold medal. So we go through this process. We start the same process with our suppliers because the scope 1 of Boralex is nothing. The scope 2 is very, very small. It's nothing because we took decision. We sold the first plant I built in France when I was alone. I have to sold it because it was a cogen. There was some natural gas used there. The same was a biomass plant. But no, we are just have to work on scope 3, and it comes from customers like you mentioned. So 98%. Before going through the complete, because it's not easy with the small suppliers, as you mentioned, but 98% of what we bought last year was under the Sustainable Procurement Charter of Boralex. It was signed by the suppliers. So you have to take the time to explain to them. With big suppliers, it's easier because normally they have the same. And there is all the question of PV procurement in our business. So this has to change. But again, it's a question of preparing company and society to the next crisis. When you discover that 99% of the silicon is produced PV cells are produced in China, and that there is a lot of geopolitical risk, then you have a crisis. But think it before, and then you prepare to something more sustainable. So that's today it's the energy procurement person who comes to us and wants to buy electricity because it's green and because it's stable on the long term, and then they will buy the difference or sell the difference on the market, or we will do that for them. So this completely changed our business. And what I think is the role of government is important. Like your CEO is to decide, okay, in the rules of the next RFP, we put some CO2 or more larger than CO2 impact on the criteria. In some place in the US, it's completely going the opposite. But in this place, we can do it, and I think it's good because it's preparing the society to the next crisis.
And Stefan, because you work in the smaller segment, and you mentioned that you're helping your investment companies prepare for questions like this. But how do you, in an early stage, make the decision? Which company do you want to invest in? Which do you think are best prepared for, the revolution and the transformation of the economy that we're talking about here?
I think our work is not so much different as it was in traditional finance. I always say the role of the financier is to predict the future, and then you place your bets accordingly. What's really different and about how we look at things is that we've decided that the main drivers of change, transformation, so risk and opportunities, would be induced by sustainability. So I'm a big fan of the donut economy. So we now understand that, see, our economy is affected by the limits of the planet, and on the other side, there's the needs of the people. And right now, it should be like this, but it's like this. It is just a mathematical question for economy to kind of retract within these boundaries, and that means some things are going to grow, some things are not going to grow, some things are going to degrow. So that's the framework for reference as to what are the sectors, what are the opportunities that we want to bet on. Now, identifying the company that's going to win that game, at first it's exactly the same thing. Good management, market perspective, sound strategy. But one of the things that becomes more and more important is do we have the same purpose? Because this is what we want to act upon. We want to be the enabler of that transformation. So the question of purpose becomes like a real financial conversation. Is it a thesis for investment? Can it be translated in a thesis for impact? Are your financial projections translatable in impact projections? You were talking about time. My company is going to take 15 years to actually realize all the impact. Can you adapt as a financier and contemplate an investment for 15 years? Nope. We flip company in 3 years. Like at Fondation, we're an evergreen. So we can go 15, 25 years. So we can adapt because we have the same purpose. With purpose comes alignment. So we start asking questions such as, is management aligned with our purpose and us with their purpose? Do we have the same alignment at the board level? When we actually invite co-investors with us, can we actually share that purpose? So I think it's what we're looking at, we're investing in these companies, apart from we do full ESG integration, ESG opportunities, best of class analysis, impact analysis. But at the end of the day, once we've done that, what we're looking for is still the same thing. The thing that is really different is that purpose. And I think this is also what's fueling opportunities to work with companies such as yours is there are persons within every system that share the same purpose as I do, and we can work together to drive that agenda together. If I want to succeed in that transition or transformation or radical transformation, I need people with radical purpose because they're going to find the right partners in the ecosystem to drive that transformation. So I think this is really how we're looking at it on our side. And I think that's how most impact investors look at it. Voilà.
Yeah, and I think we can talk another half hour about just that point, right? But
Yep.
So on the regulation and scope 3, just to come back to that, obviously we all know that there is regulation coming for disclosure for mostly listed companies, for larger listed companies, but that will ultimately also push smaller companies to start reporting. This has already taken effect in Europe, but we see an SEC proposal for the US as well. what's your view on this, Hélène? Do you think this is helpful for you to push further change, or is it actually making your job, more difficult to do it, to gather the information from your supply chain to start reporting on
I
Scope
think,
3?
as a company, we did not wait for disclosure to become mandatory, but for sure, when things become mandatory and they become a compliance issue, it helps the agent of change push things inside the company, because I could be a really good agent for change inside the company and push things, but, the built-in incentive that we have now is helping me quite a bit. And therefore, if there are mandatory disclosures, Scope 1, Scope 2, but even Scope 3, it will help. But what it would help to have those mandatory disclosure is that it would force people to work together. Because if you just concentrate on your Scope 1 and Scope 2, you could theoretically work in silos and say, I'm just going to have my plan and, basically work for my company. But now you really have to realize you are intertwined and your supplier's success or your success. And so everybody is linked together. But when you think about it, you're as good as your suppliers in your business, So it's the same thing for the decarbonation journey. And I think those mandatory disclosure would actually force that and would force people to work together, would force people to be closer, on that journey. So, yeah,
You're
it
in
might be
favor.
controversial
Yes.
to say that, but I think, when things become a compliance issue, it does help because there's no choice.
Yeah, it's the carrot and the stick, right? And Patrick, how are you? What about you? Because Boralex has quite an extensive reporting already. You seem to be leading in terms of disclosure and transparency. Do you think that it has given you a leg up for in terms of being prepared for this reporting requirements that are coming down the line?
Yeah, but the answer is yes. And also, we spoke yesterday about forced labor and all those things. When it comes and when it's mandatory, it's clear that you need to be prepared in advance. And again, so I come back always to this. So for sure, probably 3 years ago, when we decide to invest, we were not thinking that customers will definitely come to us. Beginning of last year, we sold 30% of our platform in France, and all the investors, without exception, private investors, investing 700 million Canadian dollars, so a lot of money. The due diligence on ESG question was really in depth, and they really check that it's real, and that's we're changing. What we have done is we brought all the oversight of ESG at the board level also. That's something which changed. We align part of our bonus is aligned to specific target that what we want to move. So we have typically chosen one of the referential, and we want to improve it. And you need to adapt that to your business, because you don't want to just check the box and do the things to have the right rating. You want to create value, but I'm sure that this create value and bring customers to us. And the acceptability also, you mentioned the fact that it improves employee engagement. It brings new talent to the company. It's easier because people say, okay, you hold the talks and you're not just saying things, and I think that's important. Yeah,
That helps. Yeah.
Can I add something? And just, where you're saying, will the mandatory disclosures help? And one thing, because there's a lot of people, from the finance world in the room, one thing that helps also is to have questions from investors. And this has truly accelerated in the last 18 months. Before that, we had no ESG questions to our investor relations. We had no ESG questions at all. But now we're being asked to participate in ESG conferences and roadshows, and we do have questions, and we have special questionnaires. So I'm not advocating for more questionnaires, please, please, please. But we do have a lot, from various bankers and all of that. But that is also a pressure. This is not regulation. but it's actually money talks. And of course, when investors are asking questions, it helps the companies to say, we're in the right track and we're investing in the right thing. So it's helping us do the right thing. So it's not always just the disclosure or the compliance, but I think the investment community has a role to play. Not just asking for disclosure, but just asking a question once in a while on the quarterly call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the investor
Well, we
community
need,
is here.
yeah, we need mandatory reporting. The IMF here in Quebec just started asking questions. So it's always like, who guards the guardians? So for us, it's the IMF. They started asking questions. The best news I've ever had in my life, because like we're surrounded with people going like, hey, we're 100 Impact, and we've been for the last 25 years. Impact did not exist 25 years ago. So it's like, that's calm. We need to be regulated. We need to be followed by IMF, and we need to be asked questions so that when we turn around and we ask you guys questions, and then you turn around in your RFPs, you're asking questions. That trickle-down effect is absolutely important. So I want to be regulated. I love that these guys want mandatory reporting, and I think it's helping everybody, agents of changes internally. But again, I'll give you the perspective on small, medium enterprise. So it's super hard to get anything. Like we're not talking about scope 3. We do some scope 3 where it's pertinent, but it's super hard to get the data. And that's 80% of our economy. Get the data. And we're using tricks to get the data. It's actually one of the guys that's leading the thing about using technology so we better the customer experience. So it's like, in my mind, it's like, can we make that gamification for the small, medium enterprise? And that's kind of a first layer. And we're investing in technology to make it easy. Like 3-click, you're done on this criteria for sustainability. This is what you need for a small, medium enterprise. The second thing is, don't just collect data. Get the data, drive insights, and give it back to these companies so that it creates value. If you just ask, people hate tedious things. If you just ask for it, it's tedious. If you can actually create value, and especially in the value chain opportunity, and say if you work on this thing with us and we take it from there to there, you're better positioned for that. So finance can help these small, medium enterprise to do so. We have the systems, we can invest in ourselves, we have the analysts, everything. So I think it's really, really important. And one of the things, the third tricks is we propose/impose, can we have a sustainable development committee at the board level? So it starts with weird conversation. General is going yeah, what are we doing here? But a year later, you have a mandate. You usually have a strong president for that committee. And it's just practice the people to answer questions, because people are asking questions. And at the beginning, the questions are pretty general or cute. And my CEO said this morning or yesterday, cute's not enough. So it's not about cuteness. So it starts cute, but then you wake up 2 years later, it's not cute, it's strategic. How do we transform our company and business model? What do we work on? And I think these are the tricks you have to use to get the small medium enterprise to get into the program. There's got to be an incentive, and it comes from all of us.
Well, I think that's the key, right? It's a means to an end. I think if it's just filling out questionnaires that are then, put on a shelf and not go anywhere, I don't think it results in any change. But one of the comments we often hear from clients is there's so many questionnaires, there's so much data that we need to collect, but we could be using all these hours to do something meaningful. Mm-hmm. I think we all need to keep in mind that as long as it drives change, you use your internal agency to knock on the board of the CEO and the CFO to drive change, then it is helpful. But we should also be mindful that we're not overdoing it. Which brings me to the last question, and we only have 4 minutes left, so not a lot of time. And I don't know if there are questions from the audience as well, if we want to entertain that, but think about it and I'll give you the last 2 minutes. I'll give you a quick round of, in the last, we'll skip one section. I want to see, from in your business model, what do you see as the key to value creation? Because we haven't really touched on that part of the title yet. Very final words from each of the panelists. I don't know, Patrick, you want to start?
Yeah, I will start with something because with financial community, I can say, okay, key is to develop the right project. That's simple, but that's not for you. What is important, and I like what you mentioned, when I'm meeting with investors, 2 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, they were all asking about what do you do with employee? Okay, that was the trend. Today, after 42 minutes, generally the guy said, or the woman said, the lady said, is it any question I didn't ask? And I say, sure. We have a very disciplined strategy on ESG, which is totally embedded in our strategic plan. So please ask more questions. That's for one thing. And start not after 42 minutes. And the second point, but because you're managing wealth, you're managing balance sheet, you're managing value. What happens if we're not sustainable in 10 years? The probability to be over 1.5 degree, I'm sorry to say that in the afternoon, in the next 5 years is 95%. That's what the UN agency said some weeks ago. So it's now. It's not in 2050. Okay, it's now. So that's my first point. And second point, work in capital-intensive business. So what creates value is the cost of capital. And if you continue to lend money at the same cost, renewable company or to company who are doing a lot of effort, it's not good. It's not good not for the planet. It's not good for your wealth. That's if you take just one point. And I saw a quote and it was wrong, but Uncle Ben in Spider-Man illustrate, you have a lot of power, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And that's your responsibility to do that. That's not we are not waiting for the framework to work, to do and to improve the company. You have to put more pressure and also on government to write correctly the RFP. That's my point.
Good. Hélène, last
So
word.
we're in this together. And I think, the key to value creation is that we need to work together. And when I was appointed Chief Sustainability Officer, I did the rounds and I started to meet a few of my counterparts in different companies. And one of them, I just happened to be employed by X.
That's it.
Okay. And I thought it was very striking because he was right. Like, we're doing this to create value for our companies, but ultimately because we want to create the sustainability of our environment, of our planet. And so we need to work together through our, supply chain. We need to work together, the investment community and us. We need to work together inside our companies. Like, I'm going to train my board on climate change this year. They accepted to be more educated on that. So it's also on us, to be the agents of change in our networks, in the areas where we can influence, basically, to make sure that we get more questions, more support, so that we can create the value with our suppliers and our value chain.
I just love you. So
you can invest in CAE.
we'll see that.
What are you waiting for?
The thing about sustainability should be talked that way. It's about passion, purpose, want to do something that is greater than I am and that than my organization is, and it should be that. But the mistake we all do, and there's a lot of panels about that, it's like we put sustainability in conformity department, and it's boring, and it's tedious, and it's technocracy, and people hate, I said it, tedious things. people love purpose and they love a strategic challenge. So you got to name your purpose. You got to act like you're pursuing that purpose with boldness. And you got to make it strategic. And this is how you're changing your organization. And people say, like, yeah, it mobilizes the employees and stuff. We need mobilized, purpose-driven people everywhere in the system, agents of change inside the company, inside the government, working for the planet or for the social, and working together. It's like an army of activists. They're already in the system. It's just a question, if you have the posture, they'll activate themselves and reveal themselves as being pursuing the same purpose you do.
And we'll train your army with simulation-based training.
I think we're out of time, but do we have a question? I can't even see. Is there any questions from the audience? Or were they so inspiring you're all in awe? I think it's time for the break then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.